everybody, and welcome to PageGroup's first virtual event in light of International Women's Day, which I'm sure you all know is on Sunday. I'm sporting all of my merchandise, you'll see. I'm Sheri Hughes, the UK Diversity and Inclusion Director for PageGroup. Delighted to see so many of you in the room, and thanks to everybody who is listening online. The plan for today is to have an open chat with these ladies who I'll come to in just a moment. It'll be an open discussion with the panel, and then the idea is to open it out to questions to those of you online and, of course, in the room. So please do get involved. We'll try and get through as many questions as we can. So just by way of a small introduction then, I've been at PageGroup for 17 years and in a diversity and inclusion role for the last 5. Gender equality, without doubt, has been a driving force for us, and we know that we have come an awfully long way. I think what's relevant here is that it isn't just about us as an employer. This, in the recruitment industry, is about how we work with our clients, how we help their recruitment, how we make sure the whole experience for them is more inclusive, and that we help them attract diversity too. So what we'd like to do today is have a chat to these ladies who are going to talk about their personal experiences in their own industries, some of which are fairly male-dominated, as we know so many are, and how they've gotten to their positions they're in now, and I guess the challenges along the way, but more importantly, you know, this is going to be about what should be done. You know, we want practical steps, not just for what we should do as employers, but also just to share with the wider populations about changes that they can make too. So to my right, I have Rahma Javed, and then I have Michelle Hands, and I've got Sonia Meggie on the far right. So Rahma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Cool. Hi everyone, my name is Rahma Javed. I lead the restaurants engineering group for Deliveroo. I've been with them for almost 2 years. My focus is actually to drive growth and profitability for our restaurant partners worldwide. Deliveroo partners up with 90,000 restaurant partners in the 13 different countries that we're live in. And before this, I was in the Valley. I was at Wealthfront as a director of engineering for our financial services area, where I led 2 of the core products, one being the college savings plan and another being the loans product. And before that, I was at Microsoft. I'm originally from Canada, so I've done my schooling there at University of Toronto, and I've also worked at like BlackBerry and IBM. So been in tech for like, you know, the last decade or so, and kind of have seen tech in different locations, whether that's Toronto, Seattle, the Valley, and like London and New York now, because I lead 5 teams across London and New York for Deliveroo.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Michelle. I've worked in the construction industry for 15 years now. Started at the age of 21, and I like to say I've worked in the trenches, and that's pretty much the case still to this day. I'm on site every day, and I'm a site engineer, so my job involves looking at drawings and then going out and setting out the site for the teams of bricklayers or ground workers. Around about 5 years ago, I started sharing stories on social media about things that happen in a man's world, which is where my handle, This Is a Man's World, on Instagram came from. And a lot of people were quite shocked and surprised at the environment that I work in and the things that had happened to me. Not all bad, there were some good things too. But I realised by sharing my story, I was helping others and expose the industry and issues that were going on there. And then around about, I guess, 3 years ago, a story about me being pregnant and working on the construction site went to the national and international newspapers. I actually took a picture pregnant, and I wrote on my belly, building 2 things at once. It was actually just a novel idea for my son, but actually my husband said you should post that, and I did, and of course with social media it went everywhere. Newspapers picked up on it, and since then I've kind of been doing public speaking, talking to people about my own experiences, and then trying to help other women in the industry fight the battles that they have on a daily basis, and also encourage the next generation of girls to come through. So that's pretty much it for me.
Super, thank you. Sonia.
Hi everybody, my name is Sonia Meggie, and I wear multiple hats. The most important hat being that I'm a mum. I have a 16-year-old daughter. I also work part-time for Business in the Community, where I'm a diversity advisor. So you'll often see me on social media having a rant about all things inclusion, but that's because I genuinely, passionately want to see change and different. And I also run a social enterprise called Inspirational You, where I showcase and feature really incredible individuals who are out there making a difference in their communities and trying to inspire young people, women and ethnic minorities.
And just to say, a lot of the positive stuff we've done with Women at Page is thanks to Sonia. She's been with us since the beginning and is still here and still fighting with us. So a lot of the Unity at Page stuff, which is also you've started to see coming out, is thanks to Sonia too. So thanks very much, ladies, for coming. So I guess let's start with the bit that is the usual. What do you think has happened over the last 10 years? Have we seen much advancement in regards to gender equality in the workplace?
I think there's been a lot more awareness than what it was in the last decade or so. I think people just coming into the door, making a lot more grassroots efforts to promote women coming into the different fields. So when I started off, there was very little awareness of tech and tech in schools, and also just promoting women to STEM careers. And I think, I've done a fair bit of work in terms of going out and talks, and, I just have a better idea in terms of what it is now. And I think there's just a lot more awareness in the existing workplace and promotion on the grassroots level that has been happening, I would say, in the last decade.
Yeah, I'd agree. I say exposure. Young girls are seeing more industries that they can get into. And I think, especially at university level as well, women are thinking, about different careers, like, for example, construction. The more it's in the media, the better it's become. In terms of actual facts and figures, I don't think the construction industry has seen a massive increase. And we're working with kind of not great figures. I think 11%, and I hope I don't get quoted on this because it might be slightly off, but 11% are women in construction. I think of that 11%, only 1% are actually on site.
Right.
So it's a hard figure to change,
Yeah.
But I think that is going to change in the future because there are a lot more events happening now. Schools, there's a lot of work with STEM, myself going into schools and talking to girls, and the excitement's there. So I think it is going, but I think the last 10 years, I think we're only really at the start.
Yeah. We just started to scratch the surface.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
A lot more needs to be done there. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think you've also seen individuals standing up and just as you've done, we are using our own platforms and we are being much more visible. And yes, the workplace is doing it, but it's also down to individuals like you, Sheri, in the workplace, continuously championing and continuously holding those who are in positions to be able to influence the agenda to actually do something. Mm-hmm. And so what we need are more voices, and we need more champions, and we need more sponsors. But we also need to think about organisations thinking about how they start to change the culture, because we want it, we can do it, we are ambitious, we are trying, but we can also only go as far as the organisations prepared to ensure that they are pushing and are behind us. So it is thinking about the pipeline programs that we have, and it is about us going into schools and remembering that whatever position we're in whichever organisation we work in, how are we continuously looking at how we can also ensure that we are paying it forward, but also thinking about how we can align ourselves with those who can influence the agenda, so we can do it both ways.
Yeah. I'm interested what actually got you two ladies into your industries, because actually I've got a chemistry degree, so I was definitely going down the STEM route myself. I'm not doing that now. But what was it that drove it for you?
So I think for me it was honestly by chance. I wanted to do medicine my entire life, and one of the reasons was that because that was kind of a projected career for a woman of my background. It was a lot more normal for a woman of a South Asian background to become a doctor than an engineer, because that was a male-dominated career. But through some chance and certain events, literally last minute, I ended up applying for electrical engineering without having any understanding or appreciation what it really means. And I just did it because I enjoyed the maths and the sciences and the physics. So again, it was by chance, right? The fact that there was no awareness, there was very well of a reason that I could not have gone into that.
Were there many other women?
No, there weren't a lot of women. I mean, even actually in my program, there were probably about the ratio was around 10%. Very few women actually ended up even just graduating with that specific degree. And then I switched into computer engineering because those two were combined, and software just seemed to be a lot more aligned with what I wanted to do. But yeah, even starting off at a company like Microsoft, which is a pretty big global company. I remember I was the only woman on my floor, and you know, I appreciated the perks of it because I was like, yeah, it means I don't need to share my bathroom with anyone.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you start seeing like the silver lining. But I don't think it was a great position, right? Just because of the fact that like I just didn't have any role models either. And so I remember starting off my career, I wasn't even that ambitious because I was just like, oh, I'll just start off, I'll get to a certain position and then I'll just be okay. And you know, like I had projected a very traditional life for myself, and not one with ambition at all. And that was just because of the environment that you grew up in.
And what was your experience then? If you were so underrepresented, how did you find having a voice?
So I think the thing is, and maybe this is probably going back to my own, a little bit of an immigrant kind of mentality. Like, you know, my parents immigrated to Canada, so I wasn't born in Canada. But it was about like, at some point you start becoming comfortable with your diversity, comfortable with being the different person in the room. And I think somewhere that actually even helped me being comfortable in an industry where there was no one who looked like me, whether that was sometimes like from a race perspective or a gender perspective, gender being the predominant factor. And yeah, it was also about like trying to find like, you know, supporters and sponsors and mentors who are able to be there for you and who are able to back you up. And I think I was quite fortunate enough to find that. Most of them were all male. Like I've never had a female boss. And like, you know, most of my coworkers are always male. But it's about like just, again, finding the silver lining in situation and like, you know, finding the sponsors from the set of people that, you know, are around you.
I'm going to come back to the mentor thing actually, but Michelle, how did you get into construction?
Well, I feel like a little bit of a fraud, but the real story is the money. Gonna be honest.
And maybe your own bathroom as well.
I did a geography degree, so I actually don't have an engineering degree. Don't tell anyone that I work for.
It's okay, no one's watching. It's fine.
I did a geography degree, and at the end of the degree, when I was writing my dissertation, I decided I wanted to be an actress, as you do. So I wanted to fly out to Los Angeles, and I needed money to do so. And there was a summer job that came up, and part of my course was geology, so it is kind of connected. We'll get there. And a friend of my brother said there's work in construction where it's seasonal. It pays really well. With a geography degree, you can do this job. So I did it for a summer, and then went off to Los Angeles, realised I was terrible at acting, came home, and then because it's such a close industry, kind of got a name for myself doing the job and managed to work for like the next 5 years doing so. And then there's a little bit of a decline in the waste industry, so I retrained as an engineer in construction. So that's kind of how I got there. But yeah, I kind of, similar to yourself, I didn't look up until after 10 years of being in the industry and think, oh my God, I've never worked with another woman. It's really bad, but I was just, I guess, tunnel vision when you're in your 20s, like for me, it was like work, travel, do all the fun, exciting things. And then after so many years and so many things that then started to happen to me, I was like, actually, this is not right. I'd never experienced anything else. And obviously I have friends that work in other industries, and they say, well, you know, we don't have to deal with that at work, what you're dealing with, and we've never come, and your stories are really interesting, and for me it was just the normal because I didn't know of anything else. So it's that kind of thing, you just crack on with it. You just think, well, this is normal.
It, like, if you haven't seen any better, you just think like, this is the best, right? Like,
exactly,
you become numb to it, right?
Exactly,
And I think it's about sometimes you just can't even call it out because you just don't know any different.
But
I think we have to call it out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I'm saying that because I didn't to call it out. So my degrees are in e-commerce and digital media, and when I finished university, my first role was in tech, so I always wanted to work in tech. But when I started, I was the only female and also the only black female. So whenever they came in, they'd ask for the systems engineer, and when I'd say it's me, I would always be asked at least 3 or 4 times who else they could be referred to. There was nobody else, it was just me. And I'd go home and I'd say to my mum, you know, they keep on undermining me. She's like, get used to it, you're a woman, this is the type of thing that you're going to have to just challenge on a daily basis. But it was exhausting, and it was a final incident where it was then the same thing as about being questioned about whether or not I could do the role by a client as a female, but also they then wanted to know what I look like, what I sound like, and things like that. So the sexism was also just, for me, really difficult to deal with, and I left. So I then didn't continue a career in tech, and my mum, you know, you waste all that money, but
yeah, I mean,
it was very
I think,
tough.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of women are even leaving tech, right?
Yeah.
Like the ones who are just like, no, this is not okay. I'm not going to continue to keep up with this, right? Like, you know, I'm not numb to the anomalies, and I'm not going to take this as the norm. And yeah, it's a toxic place sometimes. So.
And perhaps this is where our awareness, so we talked about what's happened in the last 10 years, and this is exactly what it's doing. The awareness is making women realise, actually, this isn't okay, and why should I put up with this? Actually, I'm going to look to do something different.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
So how long did it take you to find your, you know, dream job?
Well, I went back to uni, and I just thought I want to have a role where I have a purpose, whereby I can impact, where I can influence, where I can change agendas. And so that's why I say I wear two hats, because you can do so much within your day job, but within your own platform you can say what you like, you can do what you like, you can interact with who you like. I can tell you passionately, I'm Sonia, I'm really passionate about trying to ensure that I am visibly promoting women in my own space. So I do an annual event at the House of Commons called Women at the Top, and I've had some phenomenal women come along and speak over the last 8 years. And whenever I ask, every woman I ask and say, will you come along, they always say yes, because one, women get it, and two, we have so much to share. But if we are not also sharing our good and our bad days, how are we ever going to know? But I can make that difference. So it was about, okay, how do I then go to bed at night knowing that I've really impacted the world? So that's how I ended up in diversity.
And how much, so if you think about inspirational you and your daughter, how much are you seeing in them now in regards to the options they feel that are available to them?
Well, they're a different generation. They say what they like. They don't care. And for many of them, I question how many, my daughter's now 16, will she enter the workplace? Will she work for herself? Will she do both? And I do wonder how many of our teens will actually enter the workplace. I think we'll see much more freelancing or working on a casual basis with businesses, because for many of them, they will not fit that mould. And you're seeing millennials being much more vocal about what they will and will not put up with. And when they get fed up, they just leave. And so businesses are thinking about what do we do, and they do have strategies specifically around how to keep and attract millennials. But the point of me having a social enterprise is so that she knows that anything is possible. So where she's told, you know, perhaps you shouldn't study this subject, or she's told because she's doing her GCSEs, you know, perhaps you should consider this career, I'm saying no. You know, do what you want. If that's where your mind is telling you, and your heart and your soul is telling you want to go, do it, because you can. And if not, I'll introduce you to somebody that can. So I'm trying to make sure that, you know, that little black book that we often hear men talking about, well, not literally, but we know that it happens. As women, we have that too, and it's so important that we build up our networks and we can connect one another to whoever else can help us to get us where we need to.
So how do we change this then? How do we change the landscape to make roles like both of yours much more aspirational to these new generations of young girls coming through? What do we do?
Role models.
But in what way? You know, how do we make you more visible?
I mean, I think the thing is, again, like, you know, from having more role models, having more women who are there at the table making the decisions. And I think it's going to be very difficult for those women, because they're entering groups, they're entering places in which, you know, they have to play by the rules that were never made by anyone who, you know, looked like them or had the same gender and such. So it is harder for them, but, you know, they hopefully are able to get there and then, you know, make things easier for everyone else that's coming in, and, like, you know, really sponsor and really promote women and their issues and things that will make the workplace a lot more inclusive. I think that will genuinely help, because I think one of the reasons why, like, you know, I had a lack of ambition was because of the fact that I never saw any role models, right? Like, you know, you only see white male as a role model, and you're like, well, I don't fit that demographic. And so, like, you know, then my role model or the things I need to aspire or do in life should be very different, right? Like, you know, I'm not that person at the end of the day. So I think, honestly, like, fundamentally, like, a lot of those changes would really help, right? And then they can also make, like, some of the bigger changes. So, you know, Google didn't introduce maternity parking until, like, Sheryl Sandberg, which was one of their executives, like, you know, she got pregnant and she went through and faced that issue. Now, she probably wasn't the first woman at Google who got pregnant, but, you know, mattered because she was an executive, right?
Yeah.
They were able to make changes because she was an executive. So if you are at the top, then like, you know, things that are impacting you do become a bigger problem for the entire organization, and they take it on to go like, now we need to really solve it. I'm not saying like, you know, it's either this or that, but it really makes an impact.
Yeah. So, but I want to, if we haven't got people at the top, because
Yeah.
this is like, okay, great,
Yeah.
we've got you two,
Yeah.
excellent. But in the absence of having you at the top, and let's say the most senior females are perhaps in middle management levels, so not only have they not got people to look up to, they've also perhaps not got the personality perhaps about them to speak out
Yeah.
because they get pregnant and there's no maternity parking.
Yeah.
So how do we give more confidence to women, and you know, this is obviously across all other diversity strands as well, how do we give them the confidence to speak out and them know that that's okay?
I think it's hard. I think what you touched on there with exposure, communication and communities. So creating, you know, strong women, and not even strong women, any women in a community where we can help each other. The thing that I struggle with is the exposure. So I've only ever worked for myself. I've been extremely lucky as a freelance engineer, and I've worked alongside huge companies. But that's given me the ability to speak out. But there's a lot of issues that I come across that are really sensitive. And lots of other women that I speak to on podcasts that are around the world in similar industries to mine are frightened to speak out because they have a job at the end of the day, and they're worried about that job. They're worried about what friends will think. And I think that's really hard. I mean, I think twice now. In fact, a lot of people that I work with don't know that I have a YouTube channel and that I have Instagram. I do keep it very private because, you know, I am discussing things that happen at work. So I think it's hard for women to come forward. And like you say, you reach a certain position, and it's only very few that think, okay, now I've got to. They want to help other women, but they don't necessarily feel like they can because they're frightened. They're thinking, well, what will the company that I work for think if I start talking about? Because effectively, you are, you know, you're affecting them because that's the corporation you work for. So it's really difficult, and I think that's something that needs to be encouraged, but also the individual person really needs to think about. But having communities online and social is really important.
helpful,
I've managed to connect with so many women via social media, and they all, similar to me, work alone. So the really nice thing is it's kind of like when even connecting via messages, it's like, oh my God, there's someone else out there in the world, you know, and they might be on
little thought,
they're on a ship and you know, digging for oil, and they feel and they're the only woman on that ship, and then they connect with you and you have the same issues. So I think connecting each other is really important, and having conversations, doing events like
giving
this.
them strength to kind of
But also
to speak
internally
out.
tapping into the staff networks that are available, and your staff network can also be one of your strongest advocates to be able to escalate the things that you've experienced, and just thinking about how some of those key individuals perhaps could be someone that could also just be someone that can be your buddy as well. And just thinking about who else within the business could be a buddy for you that is very different to you. And I always say, if you ask somebody for a coffee, the worst they can say is no. And if they say no, it's not for you and they're not for you. But asking some of those individuals for a little bit of their time and some advice and some guidance, you just never know where that's going to lead you. And you don't have to be loud or overly confident, because many of us do not particularly like networking. The thought of going into a room and having to introduce yourself to strangers is not appealing for most. But internally, just having that one-to-one, and then that person then being aware of what you've experienced or what you'd like to do, you don't know where or how that conversation is going to escalate, and where your name's been brought up in other rooms outside of that.
And actually, that's kind of a gentler way of doing things, isn't it? We have had sort of the words mentor and sponsor kind of come up a little bit. I know you've got, Sonia, a few views on the difference between mentors and sponsors. What do you think?
I think that a sponsor is going to make a much bigger impact. A mentor is someone that can give you some informal guidance. A mentor is someone that will make time for you as and when they also have time. But we also have to be careful about the expectations that we have of mentors, because one, those individuals can only do so much. I think it's great to have someone to bounce off of. I think it's important to have a very clear relationship with them as to what you want. I've had some say that they've literally presented their workload to those mentors saying, I don't know what to do. That's not what a mentor's there for. They're just there to guide you and to support you.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking about where your career is going to go, you're thinking about who that mentor's also connected to, so them bringing you to the events that they are at, them introducing you to their circles, that's what you need and want. If you're thinking about, okay, what is my 5-year plan and how can this mentor, this sponsor support me to do just that. And some organisations have formal sponsoring relationships, some have informal. I say it's good to have both. And particularly again, going back to the pipeline, if you're thinking about where and how your career is going, but the business also being aware of that, having that formal sponsor means that on record they know what they're doing to support you with your career trajectory.
Have you ladies had sponsors or mentors?
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably had like a combination of both.
Yeah.
And I think like you mentioned, like a mentor is oftentimes someone who's there to like almost like not correct you, but like give you feedback on like, oh, you're doing this and you should maybe change your behavior here. You should consider this or that. Whereas a sponsor is not so much about like, grooming you or changing you. It's more about or guiding you. It's more about the fact that like they're your voice in the room when you're not in the room, right? And I think as you mentioned in the point above, because around the fact that, well, if you don't have women at the top, what do you do, right? And I think it's then incumbent on all like the men who are there in the room to be able to become those sponsors, right? Like to be able to champion certain women and be there and speak out for them in the rooms that they're not there, right? To really take them through like okay, what does your promotion even look like, right? Like let's work through that, right? Because men always get that support and that guidance, and it's the women who are like basically missing out. And that's why you see an attrition rate. You see women like eventually just like maybe getting up to middle management and then just not proceeding further.
I'd agree, and I've never had a formal mentor or sponsor, but three people that have been really important in my life is obviously my husband, my father, who's in business, and my brother. So my brother actually followed me into engineering, and we do the exact same job. So it's super interesting for me to discuss certain issues with him, and interestingly enough, he has similar issues, and he's like, well, I'm a guy and I still have that issue. So that's really, so he's been super supportive, and then like I say, my father, like he runs a business in a typically male-dominated industry as well, and I did a podcast with him and asked him some quite hard questions. He's just recently appointed a regional sales rep manager who's a woman, and it's the first time in 25 years. And I'm hoping it's because I kind of gave him a kick for that. But no, it's interesting, and so my support has been internally, but so many girls and women that I speak to that are in construction that haven't got parents that have been in construction struggle because it's not a glamorous industry, and there aren't other women unless they're on social media to help support them. And so that support then comes from men, and I think that's really important to talk about. When I have had the conversation at work, there's guys that I've talked to and they've been extremely close to me, and they have been so helpful. I actually share a story about two Geordie guys who were ground workers. And when I first went on site, they kind of looked at me as if to say, oh no, there's a woman on site. And actually said, wouldn't you prefer a job in boots, was the first comment that came across. Wow. It gets better than that. I ended up working with them for 3 years, and they became my biggest sponsor advocate. They actually went to the head office of the company that I worked for, and as a freelance engineer, you don't have a lot of weight because you're not employed full time. And they kind of petitioned to get me a pay rise without me knowing. And I got a pay rise and a car, and they were like, Michelle's the best engineer at this company, you need to realise that. And they just went out their way, and so I've had a lot of men who have supported me because there hasn't been any women. I think it's important that they understand just how much of an impact they can have as well, because there are super supportive men out there, and great to lean on and to learn from.
And let's make no bones about it, our allies, in whatever guise they are so powerful to us all, because we can't do it on our own. Whether you're an ally, I mean, as a white woman who's a mother, I'm still allies to all the other white mothers out there. We're all still different, so actually we do need to support one another because we will be stronger together. What about then how we feed that down? So here we are, you're sitting there as role models, and we touched on the whole ladder thing, didn't we, just before over lunch? But you know, we hear a lot about, oh, these people who are pulling the ladder up, and you know, how much are they paving the way for the generations of women coming up behind them? And you know, this shouldn't be a movable ladder. This should be something that's in situ permanently, and that is a huge sweeping staircase to allow women coming up behind us. What is it that you're doing or you're seeing happen in your industries to do that for women?
I mean, at Deliveroo, one of the things that we have is like a mentorship program. So it basically pairs like, you know, younger women who are just like earlier in their career with some of the more senior women. So I think that's a good amount of exposure that they get, because they're able to like, you know, talk through the issues and the problems that they're facing. And also find like, you know, mentor slash a sponsor is probably going to be, because they're not directly linked to their work. So sponsor is going to be like not that applicable there. But yeah, just seeing like, again, having a little bit of a role model and a program in which you can go ahead and talk about it. I think all of us, you know, individually at our own level, to be able to go out and like, you know, speak at different events and like, you know, speak at schools. So that might not be directly at the workplace that you're there, but it would also be around like, okay, how am I, like, what am I doing my bit to create that awareness and stuff. And I think, again, in the workplace, it's about identifying like, you know, who are those women that maybe you see yourself into, like where you were like, you know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, right? And just like carving out a little bit of an extra time with them, and like, you know, spending the time with them to go like, no, I really think you can do this, right? Like, you know, I know the impact I've had in my own career, where, you know, one of the women executive, like, no, she sat with me and she's like, you're good. I was like, really? And she's like, no, you're good, you got this. And I was like, you have no idea what those like few words like, you know, made for like as an impact to me, right? Because women do suffer from an imposter syndrome oftentimes more than men. And to actually have someone to tell you that, to go like, no, you got this, or you're good, really, really can make an impact and boost your own confidence. So yeah, I mean, I think for anyone who like, you know, is at any different level, because you're probably a role model, you know, in some capacity or another, you know, go out there, find that person who you feel like maybe you see a little bit of yourself in them where you were before, and just like, you know, just promote them, and just like not like actually just give them promotion, but like speak to them, like encourage them, and really like, you know, make them feel that this is a place in which they can shine and they can do their best work, and maybe someone's got their back. Right, I think that's the most important thing.
It's a comfort, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the support network is really important. I think it's interesting what you say about pulling the ladder up, and discuss sometimes when you work in a male-dominated environment, it's a bit of a rite of passage that, you know, I got here and it's because I've got tough skin and I've had to deal with all those issues. So if you want to follow in my footsteps, then you need to do that too. And it's just not right. It's like, actually, you should look at what you've been through, and which is what I did. Is I started to have a little black book. That is a black book as well. That is just full of things that have happened over the years. And
you're going to write a book?
Yeah, I've been told. Yeah, it's in. My husband's a lecturer, and he's like, oh my God, I cannot read. Don't let me check 10,000 words, please. But yeah, so in this book, and I read it, and I think, this can't happen to others, and it still is happening. And I hear stories from other girls that are far worse than some of my stories. And it's about that realisation and thinking, let's push that ladder as far down, and let's help everyone up, because the reality is, unless we change the figures and get more women in, we're not going to change the culture. You know, in construction, the culture is so embedded, this male bravado, and it's so difficult to change that unless, you know, you can scream to the top of your voice, but it's the more women we get in, the more we're kind of going to group together.
We need to have strength in numbers.
And we're going to say, hold on a minute, this is not, you know, if I'm in a meeting and there's like 10 guys in there, I am, even though I've been in the industry so long, I am going to think twice about standing up and saying something if it's inappropriate. Whereas if there's a few more women at the table, I think, okay, these girls have got my back, I'm going to say something. So yeah, I think it's vitally important, and unfortunately there may be some women that do exist that feel like it's a rite of passage and they don't want to help others, but I think that's not so much now, because I think we're realising the bigger global issue, and that we can see in the power of how we can help each other, elevate each other to the top. So it's important.
I was speaking on another International Women's Day panel yesterday, and the male ally that was on the panel quoted one of his mentors, and he said that one of the things she's always said to him and anybody that she mentors is that the greatest gift you can give is a gift of confidence. And I just thought, how powerful is that? And she said that's why she always ensures that she's there to sponsor others. That's why she always ensures that when others ask her for her time, that she'll give the time. And however she can be a part of networks or externally be a voice to speak on panels, she does so. And there are lots of women who do get that and are living and breathing that. And I'm sure the women in the room today can all share stories as to what they've done or what others have done for them. And those who say, I worked really hard, and there's a saying, there's a room for women like you. Anyway, I just think that it's when you get to the top, just think about as you look down, does the workplace look how you want it to look, and will it continue to look that way with that attitude?
I think that's great, because we do see, we see women at the top, but we see them, want to fit into that male environment, and therefore actually the pipelines below them are not in the slightest bit reflective, are they? And actually, if we're going to accelerate change, then we've got to be more determined in how we go about doing it, and use our platform, to really help bring women up. I think it might be time to start to see if we've got any questions from the room. So we're going to see how the technology works. Keep your fingers crossed, everybody. As I go into, Phil and Holly mode. Here we go. Right. Yes, we have some questions. How do fellow women work? Oh, this is from, do I say the name? Yeah. This is from Lynn. Thank you, Lynn Burtonshaw. How do fellow women work against the professional norm where women are encouraged to flirt their way to the top? I have recently challenged this, and it's been alluded that I'm overreacting. Who'd like to take that one? Oh, wow. That's a good one.
Sorry,
So social norm as in, so we don't...
Women are encouraged to flirt their way to the top.
I'm lost for words on that one.
Yeah.
I'm guessing the sector that she's
Are we
in.
1950s?
Well, it's the sector. It's perhaps who her immediate line manager is or who her boss is, because who is sharing that with her to encourage her to exude that type of behaviour.
It's highly unacceptable.
It's wrong.
Yeah.
It's just wrong. That's it. I'm lost for words.
It's basically saying that our power is how we look, and to be honest, flirting on the construction site. I mean, you're opening up a can of worms there, really. I mean, you get yourself in a whole heap of trouble. If anything, what I've done is deflect anything, so you go dressed. It gets one of those things merging in with your environment. Any kind of, I think once I had got wore makeup to site, and it was like the worst thing ever. The attention was just through. So I think it's like you say, it kind of takes the power away from what we can offer and what we're about,
and what we really want to be known for. Our ability and skills and performance.
But I would also say we should really not suppress kind of like who we are.
No.
So I think one of the other factors that happens is, and it's actually very common, probably really common in tech, is that, and it personally actually happened with me, where I remember starting off my career and swearing or using of any profanity was just like not me as a person. But eventually as I started growing in my career and just being part of tech, it's just a very much of a norm in the culture there. And now I've actually just started picking up on that and going no, this is not acceptable. This is not who I was, and I'm not just going to continue on with that, right? I think same goes with the pub culture that is just so prevalent here. I remember coming to Europe and started doing that for a little bit, and I don't drink alcohol, so I would just go there and drink soda water, and after a while I'm there's only so much soda water I can just and I mean alcohol is a social lubricant, so I'm I don't have that going for me right now. But I don't go out, and I mean I am, or the way that I dress, and I'm not going to change the way that I dress just to kind of fit in. So it is very important to be your authentic self at work.
But I think that comes with age and confidence. So so someone that's entering the industry in their early 20s, it's hard because you do want to fit in and you do want to rise up the ranks and be accepted in the workplace, and it's so easy. I mean, I've done it myself for the first 5 years. I think you become the swear, you swear, you do all sorts of things. So sometimes I've been home, my husband's like, who's that? Leave that person at the door and come back to who you are. And it's a real hard thing to fight. And I think you only get it, like I have as well in the last couple of years, with age and a bit of confidence.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be the case, but it sadly is.
Yeah. So answer is it's unacceptable.
Unacceptable.
Yeah.
But it's right. Yeah, I think your point there, Rahma, about being your authentic self. I just don't think that is taken on board strongly enough. You know, I think, I mean, even in our recruitment industry, you know, it's a sales environment. You know, if you aren't allowing somebody to be themselves, be the best version of themselves, how in any role, you know, your roles, our roles, how can anybody be expected to perform at their best? And I find that really baffling, because people I have come across who have had to hide part of who they are. It's so exhausting. So exhausting. And I just think that's not actually helping anybody. That's not helping the employer. It's not helping the employee, and it's not helping any of their peer group or anybody around them either. So it's a really important point. So another question here from Amy Freelander. I've seen a lot of women bullying other women because of competition. What can we do about this?
I think this goes back to the point around, like, you know, don't pull the ladder and, like, be supportive. Also, like, pay it forward, right? Like, you know, you got there because of, like, a variety of different factors, right? Like, yes, of course, you know, the hard work that you have put into it, that's phenomenal. But it was about, like, you know, someone eventually paved the way for you, right? And, like, you know, not realizing and appreciating the fact that if you don't do this for someone else, like, how are you going to proceed further? So I really think it's about, like, you know, being empathetic and supportive, and like, you know, like you were mentioning, like, you know, when you look down, is this the organization or the world? Sometimes actually just think about, is this the world that you want your children to be coming into, right? Is this the environment that you want your children to be coming into? And I mean, I'm a big believer of karma, and I do think, like, you know, things come back to you. So if you're going to be doing that to someone else, like, someone down the line is going to do the same thing to you.
Definitely.
I challenge women when I hear that. I ask them, do you feel better now?
That's great. What do they say back? Do they go, they just wither?
They just, you know, but yeah, exactly that. So you go home and you've done that, and then what? And what happens tomorrow? And how do you think other people feel about you? And how do you think people are talking about you? And how do you think your career is going to progress as a result of what you've done?
So true.
Sometimes, unless you're called out, it's the same as the bully in the playground.
It's no different.
It's child's mentality. I've never experienced it because I've never worked with another woman, so I've never had that.
You're like, I'm so far removed.
Yeah, I am so far removed from that, and it's interesting because it's something that I hear from my friends that work in different industries, and they go, oh yeah, you get bullied by women. I'm like, oh, like it's a thing, and it's such a shame because, like you say, in life you've got so many other things to deal with. Last thing you want to deal with is...
And actually that's possibly not gender specific. I mean, whilst that is specifically women bringing other women down, which is just not on, you know, we get enough of that from men sometimes, not all, obviously. But, you know, we get enough of that why can't we just pick each other up and build each other up rather than tearing each other down?
A lot of men, I think a lot of mental health issues are discussed, especially in construction at the moment, and there's a lot of bullying that goes on, you know, but male to male and in that environment, so I think, like you say, it's not just down to women, it's on both sides of the coin.
It's human behaviour.
It is, unfortunately. It's personality types. I mean, we can't change everyone.
To take Sonia's point though, who feels better after it anyway? It doesn't do anybody any good, does it?
No.
I mean, it's effectively a complex that they have, that they're just trying to like hide and like make themselves feel better. So
So really, we can add psychologists to our, you know.
Exactly.
Another question here. Once you, from Ashley Spooner, once you have hired female leaders or managers, how do you ensure that they feel a sense of belonging in the workplace? That's a good question.
I think the example of what you did 2 years ago and are continuing to do with women at Page, which was to have the listening sessions with the senior women here. To allow their voice to be heard and to ensure that that session wasn't just there and ended there, but you followed through on the things that they wanted. So having space with your execs, looking at how they can also secure mentors externally as well, so they've got that external sounding board for women who are in similar roles and at a similar level, but also ensuring that there's an opportunity for them to be able to network with one another, because also what happens with women who are in senior roles, it can also be incredibly isolating. And people forget that the pressure that's placed on you because you are one in that role, so people are looking up to you, so you have that pressure of others thinking, oh my goodness, wow, you are everything that I want. That's a lot to have to carry with you. But then also being able to say, actually, you know, I can't cope, is then seen as a weakness, because then you're worried that the business will say, see, I knew it. And so there's that. Right. But you are, via both yourself and Sarah, very proactive, ensuring that women are supported. And if we have others who are, as you are, leading by example, that makes such a huge difference to ensure that that talent stays.
Yeah. And I think, on top of the support groups, like making sure that they do have a path carved out for, progression to the next level, but also kind of be like very, very empathetic around like what stage they might be at their life then. Usually, and this is not the norm, but like, a lot of women at that point would be thinking about potentially starting a family or like, having those other responsibilities in their life. So what sort of programs do you actually have around maternity or both around paternity, right? That supports them and supports their growth and helps them like kind of realize that like, we do realize you have something else also going on in your life, and like, it's going to be a fully inclusive environment. We don't still expect you to like, give like completely and like, this to become your complete life. And I think really sometimes like just looking at the maternity program that like allows women to not just like, have that other things going on in their life, but also promotes and encourages them to come back, right? Like, if you're coming back from maternity leave a year later and the workplace has entirely changed and now you're like, well, we effectively kind of don't really have that role for you anymore that. And you're like automatically like, almost discouraged. And at that point you're like, well, do I really even want to come back? Do I want to take on this endeavor? Like I have this whole other part that's going on. Maybe I should just focus on that. So like, being a lot more like empathetic and appreciative of like, what else might be going on with them.
Yeah, I fully agree on that. And interestingly, a side point on that maternity thing, a gentleman that I'm working with at the moment, he was a senior engineer at a large construction company, and he left on 3 occasions to take a year off with each one of his sons. And we have a really open conversation now, and he's like, it's amazing. And actually, I think it's interesting if we have capability to allow men to take time off as well for the appreciation of how hard it is to come back into the workplace. And one of the things he was saying, he was like, oh my gosh, like, it is not easy.
He hadn't realised. And why would he have?
But also he feels, and I hope he doesn't mind me talking about this, he feels like, he said, I feel that I've lost my ability as an engineer over a year to get back in. And he's worried about going back in. And he said on his CV that he's really proud to put that he took a year out to look after his children. He said, but he is worried as well. He's like, I'm worried about going back in. I've lost a year. Also, he said, I know a lot of eyes are going to roll when I put on my CV, parent for a year. But the reality is we joke and we say, well, look, if you can survive soft play with a 2-year-old, you can run a construction site, like, you're more than capable of doing so. So it's really interesting, and I think the one thing that I'm looking at now and interested in is offering it out to men as well for shared parental leave.
Why is the entire responsibility on women?
Exactly,
for that, right? Like,
and then they would understand. So my husband is in a university, he's a lecturer, and actually we're hoping that he can take 3 months off soon. And it'd be really interesting to see the difference and to get his perspective on going back in. So I think it's a case of looking outside of just women and maternity and thinking, how can we flip it? And I know some countries, I think, are further ahead of us, like Sweden.
Scandinavia.
They're pretty much on that.
I even think it goes beyond that as well, because all too often when I'm doing events and it's specifically around gender, it's like, what about those women who aren't mothers?
Exactly.
And, I've had people talk to me about their dogs and their horses and the fact that they're building a house and the fact that they're doing this. And it's actually, the truth is, it doesn't actually matter what your drivers are or what your reasons are to either have some time out or have a slightly different working pattern or whatever it is. The point is, your life choices are your life choices, and everybody should have the same opportunity to achieve what they want to achieve out of their career as well. And it shouldn't just mean we make allowances for those who become parents. This is about everybody, and that comes up an awful lot. And I especially remember this one woman talking about her horses, because actually they take up a lot of time and a lot of money, and it's a mighty commitment. And I guess it goes on a bit further, doesn't it? Those who've got elderly parents, the caring generation, they don't get talked about an awful lot because it doesn't tend to be quite such an easy topic for people to talk about.
Private for many.
It's often not a happy scenario, so it can be very difficult. And I think there is so much more that all businesses can do to recognise that.
But are doing as well.
And we do it. We do.
Caring is very much on the agenda, and it's interesting because I'm seeing that the parenting networks are normally paired up with the carers now as well, so they're not necessarily separate. Which is a good thing.
And to be fair, whilst ours is called Parents at Page, it is actually for all carers in whatever that capacity might be. I always like this question. I'd be interested to hear what you ladies have to say. So Taylor Greeley says, what advice would you give to your younger selves? You don't have to go first if you want time. Sonia will know this
do you know, my event in 2 weeks' time is called that. So I have an event in Parliament called Letter to My Teen Self. And it's always interesting when I hear all of the women reading their letter, and they all pretty much they always start by saying that they're sorry for questioning their confidence, they're sorry for questioning their looks, they're sorry for being sidetracked by relationships when they should have listened to their parents, but most of all they're sorry that they just doubted themselves. And so to my teen self, it would be just find ways to overcome doubt and confidence, because that continues on. And if you ask women what's held you back, most of the time it's imposter syndrome.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I think his gift is confidence, after all.
Yeah. I think I tell my younger self to actually have more experiences. And like you said, like, you know, being more sure of yourself. But yeah, like being able to just have like a different set of experiences. Like don't let a set of like choices which you have seen being taken over and over again, like dictate who you
Your
are.
own path,
Kind of like really realize that your path might be completely different, and it is okay to be on that completely different path. And I think one part of like actually just, you know, building more confidence is to have different experiences. And really like appreciating and enjoying life. So
yeah, don't sweat the small stuff, because I think, like you say, the younger you are, more impressionable, and you fear a lot of things, and it stops you from moving
and peer
forward.
pressure is big, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's worse with social media now.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a fear for the next generation, and I have a lot of messages from girls that are doing engineering or thinking about starting a career, and the one thing they say is, I'm not sure if this is me for life, and my advice to them is, it might only be for a couple of years. Change, life is fluid, things happen, and I think as your younger self, you can think, oh, am I going to be doing this career path for X amount of years? Am I going to like it? The reality is you don't know what's around the corner. So just go with it, and the big one is confidence. Like, it's so hard, and I was so not confident when I was younger, and the only thing that gets you there, from my perspective, has been experiences. So just experience as much as you possibly can. It's going to be tough. I mean, I think we have to be honest. I think we have to say, that it's not going to be a walk in the park, but go for it, because you will feel empowered at every step that you take.
And you have to stand by those decisions that you make at 15, do you?
I mean,
you'd be in LA now.
I'd be like really famous, collecting an Oscar.
And I think it's also about one thing leads to another. If you have a very like cookie cutter life, then you can just see yourself and go like, oh, in 10 years I'm going to be here. If you're just open to a lot more experiences, you don't know what one thing's going to lead to another. And you know what? You might literally end up discovering what you really like. Because we're always told what we should like and what we should not like, and this is right and this is wrong, but we never really end up making that choice.
Knows? Exactly.
My mantra, and I always tell everybody, is don't ask, don't get.
So true.
So
I've got a few in here. I'm getting a bit. Anne Rad says, I was wondering if any of the panel have been given the opportunity to access coaching during their careers, either by their employer or independently.
For me, that's actually happening now. And I'm very thankful for Deliveroo for actually setting up a coach for myself and working with me through that process. I've had a lot of just implicit coaching and informal coaching, but those are people that I have just been introduced through some social connections or reached out to myself. But now I'm actually going through a formal coaching process, which again I'm very thankful for.
Oh, great.
Mine's informal, and I have 2 informal coaches now. And the reason why I've approached these 2 individuals is because I just want to just feel like I'm on track. I feel like you can often just feel like your plate is really consuming, and you're just wondering, how can I manage all that's thrown at me? And I just need that external voice that has nothing to do with my everyday life, just helping me to just ensure that I'm doing the things that I said I would do, reminding me of the things that I wanted to do, but also just keeping me somewhat sane in terms grounded, of and grounded with everything else that I'm doing.
Pragnatavani, I hope I've said that right. We're already in such a fast-paced world, but if I could ask you all to fast forward to 2025, what change would you like to see ingrained in the workplace for women?
2025 is only 5 years
It
away.
is. Yeah. You can say 2030 if you want.
It's actually not that far away. You're going to feel, yeah.
I mean, for construction, the list is endless. There's just
So you're maybe still in baby steps. You're maybe not going to...
Yeah, I mean, I look at it now, and unfortunately, I feel like we're probably 10, 20 years away from getting anywhere near scratching the surface of getting up to where other industries are. But I think I haven't lost hope on that front. Yeah, I think it's a difficult one, but I'd love to see, like I say, just more representation, because I think representation will then change naturally. It will change culture, attitudes, perceptions. So I think just get more women in, and the one thing that I'm trying to be brutally honest with is the stories that it's not easy, and
it's
that
not
is
quick.
No, it's always hard for me, because I want to encourage girls, so I go to schools and talk to girls and get them into the industry, but if we're not also honest with them, then the worst scenario is they go in and then they're like, oh my gosh, I've come across X, Y, Z. But if we lay that out from the start, from the start, and say you're going to come across these issues, but
transparency just makes it so much
but
more.
also relaying to them that they're part of a movement.
Yeah.
They get to say for their children and the girls that follow, you get to say, well, you were part of that change and you helped enable that, however small that is, whether it's just turning up and being there, or actually, promoting an industry or doing whatever. So I think for me it's representation.
I think I'd love to see the numbers becoming a bit more equal all across to the top. So I think I think you see the numbers maybe even in the start they're a lot more equal than they used to be. But then they just keep having halves into themselves. So it was okay, well, entry level is 50-50, the next level, mid-level is probably going to be 30-60, and then it becomes a 10-90 thing. And I think to the degree that we can maintain that 50-50 or even 40-60, all the way up to the top, I think that can fundamentally make a lot of changes.
At BITC, we often use the pyramid as an example of what happens in the workplace. So, at a lower level, you have this percentage, middle, and then at the top, it can often be a snowy white peak. And looking at how we can square that pyramid. But I'd also just like to, and 2025, as you said, is around the corner, but I'd love there not to be any more the first. This is the first person that's done, and it's just a norm. It's just there's 10, 20, 30, 100,000, but not still just being so happy that the first woman has done this. The first woman is now in this role.
It needs to be like the Now albums, don't we? And it needs to be like 144 because there's that many before them. Vicky Slate says, men are now starting to feel excluded. There is an opportunity here to bring them on board and encourage them to be allies and sponsors. Have you had any advice on how to encourage this?
I think to start off, it'd be great to have this room in a 50-50. Not just what is it, four of you guys? It's great to see you guys. I think in all of these conversations, right? Because women can get into a room and talk about the issues and even changes that we'd want to bring towards the workplace. But again, if you don't have more men in these rooms listening and contributing to these discussions, it just becomes a very hard discussion. So.
And I think sometimes they're not even aware. I've had, conversations with my dad and said, why haven't you got X amount of women on your sales force? And I said, well, I've 25 years, I've got really busy business. I'm thinking also when I put ads out there, no women are applying. And he's just never sat down and thought, well, is it because of the job description that I'm putting out there? Is it, sometimes they're just not aware whether, they've just got the head in the clouds or whatever. But if you have conversations, sometimes that makes them think, oh, I had a conversation with a guy on site last week and I explained a story and he's like, I have no idea that you've had to deal with that over the years. And his perspective changed. But I think having the conversation, like you say, and then going to events where it's all women, sometimes guys are frightened to go because I think we're all burning bras and like
having pillow fights. And,
exactly. And like as soon as they walk in the room, we're gonna kill you. It's not the case. Like, and I think that's really important because at the end of the day, like we discussed, if you're in a group full of women and you're talking about the issues, that's great, but you're preaching to the converted. You know, if we're not talking to guys about it, they're not going to think, oh, actually I'm part of the problem. Not part of the problem, but I can help.
I'll be part of the solution.
Exactly.
But a lot of companies, and there are lots of men who are asking for KPIs, who are saying that their bonus should be attached to diversity targets, and they are ensuring that they are part of the allies programs, and there are different groups of men who are meeting to look at how they can be better allies. But also, it's also about ensuring that we are inviting men to the events that we have, ensuring that men are aware of what we are doing and being much more targeted as well, because we need to have the minority, i.e. the men, in the room with the majority, because they're never going to know or understand what women are experiencing if they're never told. And if there are men in your organisation that are senior, or you know your male CEO has never been invited to anything that you've done internally or externally. So Sunday's International Women's Day, you know, how many of us have invited any of the men to anything that's happening on Sunday? You know, maybe not many of us, but unless they know, how are they going to be able to say, okay, on Monday I was here, I've heard this, what can I do?
I think it goes back to the allies thing, doesn't it? Everyone is an ally, and everyone has such a big part to play in really moving this forward. We are coming to the end. I had so many more questions on there, so thank you to everybody who's been listening online. So just a very quick wrap up, ladies. What would your final pearls of wisdom be out to the audience today? Or I can do it for you. I've noted down all of your pearls of wisdom.
I think mine would be like, you know, do your bit. It's important, like, you know, whatever position you are, like, you know, whatever, like, you know, level you are in your career right now, if you've just started or if you've been working for like, you know, 1, 2, 3, however many decades, like, you know, do your bit, and like, you know, make sure you're not the individual who pulls up the ladder. You're the individual that, like, you know, just, you know, keeps the ladder open for everyone else to join. And yeah, to the men of the room, like, you know, become the sponsors of, like, you know, the women that are around you, right? Because just remember that this is going to be the world that your daughters, like, you know, or your nieces, you know, or whoever it is, right? Like, you know, that is very dear to you, is walking into. So is this the workforce that you want them to be coming into?
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, definitely have that conversation, and don't be frightened of topics that should, well, some people think should be hush-hushed. I think the more we talk, the more we can learn from each other, and that's another important thing, is that even in construction, when I speak to other women in other industries, that they've been through similar things, and you can learn so much from each other. So like I read a lot of books and YouTube, and that's great, but actually just talking, you can learn so much from your peers. So don't be afraid to have conversations with everyone and anyone, and guys, that includes them too.
Mine is there's so much power in listening. Having those conversations and just absorbing what's being said. And for the women in the room and watching, just use your power, because whether you are 5 years old or you're 105 years old, everybody has an incredible story to share, and somebody admires you and has so much respect for what you've done, regardless of where you work or where you're at in your career. So use that power and use that influence to look at how you can inspire those around you and those who are coming up.
Fantastic. And I think just the one resounding comment for me, which I'm going to finish on, is that, you know, whenever you do anything or say anything, do you feel better afterwards? Because I thought that was so powerful. Thanks to everybody in the room, thanks to everybody who's listening, and very special thanks, Sonia, Michelle and Rahma.
Thank you.
Thank you.